6 or 7 deep in these. This semester is flying by. But Dan has volunteered to teach this. For those of you who got my invite, you saw Paradise by the dashboard lights, and you were thinking, meatloaf. There's no meatloaf today. There's no meatloaf today. I'm sorry. But we had Dan who was as good or better than a good meatloaf. He's going to not sing for you today, but he's going to hopefully make his computer sing a bit and show you how he has built dashboards and talk you through the great things he's done with dashboarding. I think for some of you who may know, as maybe if any cadets are online, may know Dan's work. I mean, he started doing this dashboard for the football poll, yep. Right? That's sort of like, and that got a lot of traction. A lot of people excited about it. So he's just sharing his skills, and I'm looking forward to a real collaborative session here. So without further ado, Dan, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you, sir. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm Major Dan Baller. I teach MA 388 this semester in the math department, sabermetrics, and then I'm also the director for the Center for Data Analysis and Statistics with Colonel Schwartz. So as Colonel Swinson was saying, I did get into this about 9 months ago, really to automate the football picks and to make my life a little bit easier, not having to put this stuff out every week and snip plots and do all that. And I now use these dashboards for just about everything that I do, from tracking workouts to tracking my sports betting. So I'm doing pretty much everything in these dashboards now. So if you haven't yet, please take those actions on the screen. You will need Git today. Also, if you don't have a GitHub account, you will need that. I will have some kind of off ramps if something doesn't work for you. I can get with you afterwards. And at the end of the day, when you go to host your dashboard, if you aren't able to tie your RStudio to GitHub, we have some workarounds for that. So I have 3 main objectives today. 1, trying to get your RStudio connected to GitHub. 2, going over some basic and some of the more advanced dashboarding skills with the Flexdashboard package in R. And then lastly, understanding how to use GitHub to host your dashboard as a website. So hopefully by the end of today, you will have a completed dashboard that is on GitHub that anyone can access if they have the URL. So to get started, I'm going to go to GitHub. So if you can go log into your GitHub account, and it should take you to this dashboard page. And we're going to create a new repo for today's class. So I'm going to click on this green new button here. I'm not going to choose a template. I'm going to give it a name, and I'm just going to call this Advanced Dashboarding. You can put a description in here if you want. Now, choosing public or private. If you choose public, anyone can get to your repo. They can see your code. They'll be able to see your website, all of that. If you choose private, you will be the only one that can get to it unless you add specific people to it. So I'm going to leave this as public, and then we're not going to check any of these things down here. The biggest thing is you do not want a README file. If you have a README file in the repo, it is going to use that when it's trying to host your dashboard. It's going to host the README file as opposed to hosting the actual dashboard. So I'm just going to come down here and hit Create Repository. And now we have an empty repo here on GitHub. So I'm now going to go to R. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to try to tie your RStudio to GitHub. So if you've installed Git on your computer from gitforwindows.org, you can then go up to Tools, and we're going to change a couple settings. So I'm going to go to Global Options. I'm going to come down here to Git SVN. And the first thing I want to do is I want to make sure that I have a path in here to the Git executable file. So if you don't have anything here, hit Browse and go navigate to that file. And it should be a path that is very similar to what I have here. So I'll give you a second to go find that file if you don't have that path already put in there. Double check, We got team still up and running. Okay. And if I'm going too fast, please slow me down, stop me, ask any questions that you have as we're going through this. We'll have time for that. So the next thing that we need to do is we need to change our settings for the terminal. So I'm going to go to the terminal here, and I want to make sure that new terminals open with git bash. If you have any of these others selected, I want to choose git bash. Now, once we have those settings changed, I'm going to scroll down and hit apply and hit OK.
It's doing something for all the times we use R.
Yes,
Just when we
it is.
write the dashboard.
So it is changing settings, your global settings in R. It's not going to impact anything that you do except for what we're going to do today,
Okay.
right? Unless you're trying to push stuff back and forth to GitHub, it's not going to impact that. So now that we've changed our settings, we need to introduce ourselves to GitHub, and we're going to use this package. So I'm going to use the library command to load use this. And so I'm just going to hit enter here. And now I'm going to use one of the commands from this use this package to link our RStudio to GitHub. And that's going to be use _ git _ config. Oops. And in that, it's going to take 2 arguments. Those 2 arguments are going to be a username. So it's user.name. And I'm going to put it in quotes. And I'm going to say Daniel Ballard.
This has to match your GitHub.
It should match your GitHub username. The username is not as important as the email. The email has to match your email for your GitHub account. So the second argument here is going to be user.email. And so whatever email you have tied to your GitHub account, we're going to put that in here. Don't know what email is tied to your GitHub account. We can go back to our GitHub page here. If you click on your picture up in the top right corner, you can go down to settings. You can find emails on the left-hand side, and then you'll have a primary email here. Yes.
Just a quick question. If you've done this already.
If you've done this already, you don't have to do it again. Yep. So if you have already tied your GitHub to, or your RStudio to GitHub, you do not have to do it again. Now we can check and make sure that you have done it. And we're going to go to the terminal here. And when I go to the terminal, you have to type this in exactly. In the terminal, spacing matters. And so I'm going to type in git space config space -- global space -- list. And I'm just going to run this code by hitting enter. And you should see a username and user email pop up here. If you see that, you are good.
You don't need all that filter.
You don't need all the other stuff. The other stuff is because I'm using some of the large file storage on GitHub. But if you have these 2 lines that say username and user email, you're set. I'll give everyone a second to get there. See if anything's got Teams. Okay. So you go to terminal. You should have a $sign here on the terminal, right? Starting your line of code. If you do not have a $sign there, you're going to go up to terminal 1 and you're going to hit new terminal. So your lines in the terminal should start with the $sign. If they don't, you're going to go up to terminal and hit new terminal, and then it will start with that $sign.
Okay.
If it starts with the $sign, you're going to type in git space config space -- global space -- list. And that should come up with the username and password that you just set with the use this command or with the use this package. If it's not working, I will get with you after this. It's not going to interrupt what we're going to do. You're just going to have to upload your stuff to GitHub in a slightly different way.
Can you go back to the console for a second?
So if you did not run this line of code, make sure you run this line of code, this use_git config. I'm not running it just because I've already set this, so I don't want to change what I have in there. Okay. So now that we have this, our RStudio tied to GitHub, I'm going to go and I'm going to start a new project. So up here, you'll see it says project none. I'm going to come up and hit new project. And if I was just doing this normally, I would choose new directory. But since we're interacting with GitHub, I'm going to choose version control and I'm going to choose Git. Now, if you were successful in tying your Git to your RStudio, you're going to do exactly what I'm doing right now. If you weren't able to get your Git connected to your RStudio, then you are just going to do a normal project. You're just going to say, you're going to go to, instead of choosing version control, you're just going to hit new directory. But so if you're tied to GitHub, I'm going to go to version control and Git. I'm going to go back to my GitHub page here. This is that repo that we just created. And I'm going to copy the URL by clicking this button here.
So you lost me. Can you back up like a minute? Okay, where did you get this from?
So to get this, I went to project, new project, and then I go to version control.
If we don't see that slash if the previous thing doesn't work.
Then you're going to choose new directory. Fine.
What if we don't even see?
You don't see new directory.
Project, but not new directory.
So you should, when you go up here, you hit project, new project, and then you should see new directory here.
It might be asking if you want to save your workspace first.
Oh,
You can say no.
this one? Thank you.
Bingo. Okay. So if you have something open in R right now, it's going to ask you if you want to save your workspace. You can choose to save it or not. Either way, it should then come up with this screen. If you're able to tie your Git, you're going to choose this version control. If not, you're going to choose new directory. So I'm going to click on this version control. I'm going to pick Git here. I'm going to go back to GitHub and I'm going to copy the URL for this repo. I'm then going to come back to this page here and paste that in. It's going to create a directory called advanced dashboarding. That's what we called our repo. And I can choose where I want this on my computer. So if you don't like where it comes up with, you can hit browse and choose exactly where you want this. And what this is going to do is it's going to create a folder on your computer that's going to house everything. That's where your code's going to be. That's where if you had data, you would put your data. That's going to be your working directory that we're going to work with going forward. So I'm going to then hit create project. And what this is going to do is it's going to essentially kind of start a new instance of R that we're working in this project here. And everything's kind of self-contained. When I close out of this project, whatever I have open is going to stay open right here. So does everyone have a new project open?
Not quite. Go to GitHub, we get the URL, we put that in there, and then we're.
And then just hit create.
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay. Everyone's got a new project open? All right.
Oh, yeah.
So now that we have a new project open, we're going to open our file. So I'm going to go and I'm going to go up to this piece here. This little blue, white plus inside the green circle. That's the new file button. I'm going to come down to R Markdown. And instead of just hitting OK like we normally would for a standard R Markdown file, I'm going to come down to From Template. And I'm going to choose Flexdashboard. and then I'm going to hit OK. If you do not have a Flex Dashboard option, that means you don't have the Flex Dashboard package installed. So you're going to want to cancel and do the install.packages, or you can actually come to packages here. You can hit install and you can type in Flex Dashboard and right here. So if you don't have Flex Dashboard installed, you can install it from here. And then we're going to come up here, Markdown from template, Flex Dashboard. And I'm going to hit OK. And what this is going to do is it's going to open up this file that has some pre-populated code in it. And if I just hit knit right now, I need to save this. I'm going to save this as index. So index, and this is important, right? If you save it as anything else, it is not going to host on GitHub the way that you want it to. So I'm going to save this as index. And when this knits, you now have a dashboard right here. So to knit, you just hit the little ball of yarn, right? So this knit button right here, I'm going to hit that. And it's going to create my dashboard. All right. So we see our dashboard is arranged in columns right now. I have one column on the left that has one plot in it. I have one column on the right that has two plots. And what we're going to do is first take a look at this top section here. This is our YAML. This is a section that sets some global options for our document. So I can change the title. I'm going to change this to Advanced Dashboarding. We see our output, and here from the Flex Dashboard package, we are creating a Flex Dashboard. Our orientation is columns. We could also make this rows, and we'll take a look at that a little bit later. For vertical layout, I can have this be fill, or I can have this be scroll. If it's scroll, and I'll show you what this looks like. It's going to create these panels to whatever specification you set for the size, and you're going to have to scroll through it to see everything. If I set it as fill, like we had it, and knit this, it's going to resize all my panels to fit on one screen. And so I tend to stay with it as fill just because it makes it a little more visually appealing, I think. You see everything up front, but if you had a lot of big plots or you wanted it to put a ton on this page that you could scroll through it, you could do that as well. All right. So as we scroll down in this, we'll see we have our columns, and I have a level 2 separator here, these dashes that are going to say, hey, this is going to be a column. And then I have another one, and this is another level 2 separator that's going to say, hey, separate this on the page that we're on, and this is going to be my second column. And so we are going to first load in our packages. So the packages that we're going to use today, we're going to keep using the library command to load those. So I'm going to load tidyverse. I'm going to load Homer Penguins package. This is where we're going to get our data. And you see, as I start typing, it's going to give me this autofill list. And so once I'm on the selection I want, I can just hit enter, and it's going to autofill the rest of that selection. And each time I want to run a line of code, I'm going to use Control Enter to run that line of code. I'm going to load the Plotly package. Plotly is going to allow us to make some interactive plots. I'm going to load the DT package or data table that's going to allow us to make some interactive tables. And I'm going to load Font Awesome. So the Font Awesome package allows us to bring in some free icons that we can use in our Markdown document. And now that we have all of our packages loaded, we're going to bring in our data. So the data is contained in that Palmer Penguins package. So on the next line, I'm going to type in data. And then in quotes, I'm going to put in penguins. When I run this, we'll see I have two things that show up in my environment. I have penguins, and this is penguins raw. And it says promise here. If I go to the next line and start typing in penguins, it's going to autofill that. So I can delete that. And I see I have 344 observations. So there's 344 penguins in the data set. And I have 8 variables in the penguins data and 17 in the penguins raw. We're only going to work in just this penguins data today.
You have to start typing.
You have to start typing it in for it to populate. I don't know why that is, but for some reason it just shows up with that promise until you start typing that in.
The promise I think was to you.
Yes. So we're now going to add some plots to our dashboard just to have something to fill in there. And I'm not going to spend a ton of time on plotting just because, you know, the whole point is just to have something that we're showing on our dashboard. Yes.
Data that's.
Whatever data set you wanted to bring in. So you could use read CSV and bring in whatever data. You could pull it from a GitHub page. You could bring in your data however you want it. So the first plot that I'm going to make here, I'm going to make kind of just a basic scatter plot. So I'm going to take our penguins data set. I'm going to pipe it, and the keyboard shortcut here for the pipe is Control-Shift-M. And so I'm going to pipe that into my ggplot command. In that, I need to set my aesthetics, where I'm essentially assigning variables to different parts of the plot. So to do that, we use the AES command. And in here, I'm going to set on my x-axis. Now, if I hit tab, it's going to pop up with all the different variables I have in this data set. So I'm going to look at bill length. And on my y-axis, again, I'm going to hit tab. I'm going to choose bill depth. And let's also color this by species. And species. Now, when I'm adding layers to my ggplot, I separate those with a plus. So I'm going to add a plus sign here at the end. I'm going to go to the next line. And I now have to tell R what type of plot I want to make using a geometry. So I'm going to use geom underscore point. Whoops. Create a scatter plot. And if I run this line of code now, we see we have a nice little scatter plot there showing our 3 different species of penguins with their bill length versus bill depth. And I'm going to change my header here, this chart A, to reflect what our plot is. So this is a scatter plot of bill length. So I'm going to scroll down now to chart B, and I'm going to create, let's do a box plot. So again, I'm going to take my penguins data set, use that Control-Shift-M keyboard shortcut to add in the pipe. I'm going to pipe that into my ggplot command. And again, I have to set my aesthetics. And on my x-axis now, let's look at body mass. And we will fill this. Or actually, before I do the fill, let's do our y-axis. Let's do this by sex. And we will also fill this by sex. So the difference between fill and color here, if I was to color it, it's just going to do the outline of my box plots. If I use fill, it's going to fill it in. And so I'm going to fill by sex as well. And then again, to separate my layers, I'm going to add a plus. And on the next line here, I'm going to add geom underscore box plot. So if I run this line of code now, we'll see I have a box plot here of our body mass stratified on sex. Now, for our third plot, I'm going to do a histogram. So I'm going to, again, take our penguins data. I'm going to pipe into our ggplot command. And in my aesthetics, I'm going to set my X variable. And let's look at flipper length. And let's fill this by species. So again, I'm going to separate my layers with a plus. I'm going to add in geom underscore histogram. And I'm going to add one more layer here. I'm going to put another plus, and I'm going to facet this plot. So it gives me 3 small plots, one for each species. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to use the facet wrap command. And I'm going to say, I want this as a function of species. And when I run this now, we'll see I get 3 little subplots that show me my distribution of flipper length by species. So the plots aren't super important here. It just gives you something to put into your dashboard. And so if I hit knit now, it's going to create our dashboard. And now we see all 3 of our plots together.
Can you go back a second? How'd you get all 3?
So all I did is I hit the knit button, and it's going to compile that together. It's going to knit my code, and it's going to produce my dashboard with all 3 plots there. So one thing that's nice about the dashboards is you can make multiple pages. So let's say I want to put all of my plots on one page. I'm going to come up to the top here, and before this first column, I'm going to create a page. And so I'm going to call this page plots. And I'm going to use a level 1 separator here, which is the equal sign. And that's going to tell R, hey, I want this to be a page. The dashes here separate the elements on that page. So this creates a column, and then I have another column. And then at the bottom here, let's make another page, and I'm going to call this data. It doesn't. I think you need at least like 6. I tend to go all the way across just because it looks better, I think, and helps me delineate kind of where my breaks are in my code. And so I'm going to do this again here for data. And below that, we're going to add in a table. So I'm going to add in an R code chunk, and I'm going to use the keyboard shortcut. It's Control-Alt-I, and that's going to add one of these gray code chunks here. I could also go up and hit this code chunk button and choose R. And in this, and this is what's super simple about this, I'm going to take my data set, my penguins data, and I'm going to pipe this, again, Control-Shift-M for the keyboard shortcut, into the data table command out of the DT package. And what this is going to do is it is going to create an interactive HTML table that I can look at my data with. And I'll show it here on the dashboard. I'm just going to hit the knit button. And we can see that now I have 2 pages. I have a plots page and I have a data page. And what I love about this table is it makes it so your data is interactive, right? For transparency, if you're putting this out for research purposes or something that you want people to understand what you're doing, they can go search through your data set. They can filter and sort based on your different variables. They can search, maybe I only want the Gen 2 penguins, so it's only going to pull those. I can go to my different pages and change how many entries I'm seeing and see the total number of entries in my data set. And what's really nice about this is with a couple minor tweaks, we can make it to where you can actually download the data from the dashboard. So I'm going to close out of this.
Before you, like, I mean, and you go back to the stuff at the beginning.
This here? Oh, so I just added plots with a bunch of equal signs below it. That's going to create the plots page. And then I added data with a bunch of equal signs to create the data page. So in this data table command, I'm going to add an extension to add buttons. So I'm going to use the extensions argument. So you see it starts auto-populating. I'm just going to select that. And in quotes here, I'm going to put buttons because I want to add some buttons to my table. On the next line here, I'm going to separate these arguments with commas. On the next line, I'm going to put in the options. My options are going to be a list. And the first thing I'm going to put in here is DOM, D-O-M. And I'm going to set that equal to, and again, in quotes, BLFRTIP. Whoops, sorry. Capital B, everything else is lowercase. LFRTIP. And this looks like gibberish, but each one of these letters corresponds to a piece of that table. So the P is for the pagination. So you can go from one page to the next to the data. The L is for the length. So you can change, I want to see 10 rows per page or 100 rows per page. The T is the actual table. So if this LFRTIP, this is the default for this DOM argument. What we are adding to it is the capital B, and that capital B says add buttons. If I were to delete any of these letters in here, it's going to delete something off of that table. So if I were to get rid of the P, you could no longer go from page 1 to page 2 because it's going to remove that pagination control.
Out of curiosity, if you flip the order, would it matter?
I do not believe so. So after I set that, I'm going to put another comma here after that string. And I'm going to go to my next line here, and I'm going to tell it what buttons I want to create. And so I'm going to use the buttons argument, and I'm going to use the C command to create a vector of which of the names of the buttons that I want. And so in quotes, well, maybe I want someone to be able to copy my data, or I want them to be able to download a CSV, or maybe they like Excel better. So I'm going to give them an Excel option. I'm going to add in maybe PDF. And lastly, maybe you just want to print the data. And so now, if I knit this, it's going to go through and it's going to create my table. It's going to add all of these buttons. So if I go to my data page, we see I now have this copy, CSV, Excel, PDF, and print buttons. And so if I hit one of these, let's say I just hit the CSV, it's going to allow me to download a CSV file with all of my data because the data is embedded into that dashboard.
Those things look like strings, but they weren't strings. They were actually very specific.
They were. Yep. They're very specific commands that gives you these set of options to download the data.
Find the data table.
Right.
Yep. And so if you are interested in finding more stuff you can do with the data table package, and get rid of that. Datatables.net gives you all the options that you can use to customize your HTML table. So I love this from a transparency standpoint. If you're doing this for research, you're trying to put out your findings, someone can download your data exactly how you had it, and they can see exactly what you were working with. Yes.
If you come up, map come up. Choose things wholesale.
So I've not run into that issue. Embedding it in the dashboard. So I created one for the department that was using course and feedback data. And so you're talking like 34,000 rows of data and no issue.
Can you change the defaults in data tables so it shows more than 10 on a page?
You can. You can. There are options that allow you to. So on that table as it is, right, I can go in and change that using that selector. So right here, show 10, I can go show 100. And so here's 100 on the first page, right? And I can change what I want the default to be. And so if I want the default to be 100, I can set that as one of my options. So we've talked about one HTML widget, this data table. I want to talk about another one with our plots. So I'm going to come up here to our first plot, that scatter plot. And I mentioned when we loaded our packages, the Plotly package. And Plotly allows you to make interactive plots that are HTML objects. So here in front of this line of code that I have creating our scatter plot, I'm just going to save it as something basic. I'm going to save it as the letter A. And if I run this, you'll see I now have an object over here, A. And on the next line, I'm going to use the ggplotly command. And I'm just going to put A in there. And what that's going to do is it's going to create an interactive plot. So if I knit my dashboard here, if I want you to be able to interact with these plots and kind of look around, well, now if you mouse over the points, it pops up with the actual values. I can put on this toggle spike lines. It's going to show you exactly where it's showing up on my axes. I can compare data on hover, and it's going to show data points that are similar when it comes to my x-axis value. I can turn off data points. So let's say I want to get rid of those penguins. I only want to see my Gen 2, and then I want to auto scale to just look at those guys. I can do that. And then this button over here is going to allow you to download that plot as an image. So if you want someone to be able to take your plot easily without having to right click and save and all that, they can just hit that button. It's going to auto download your plot. Any questions so far? Okay. So if you are interested in these HTML widgets, htmlwidgets.org has a showcase that shows you a bunch of the ones that we've talked about, data tables down here. I love Leaflet. I think Leaflet's a really fun one because you make these interactive maps where you can zoom in on your points and have it show different information. HighCharter is another good one for making plots that are interactive. And if you come over to the gallery, there's 127 different registered widgets that you can use in these HTML documents. So there's tons of options from network graphs to maps to all kinds of different plotting. I'm probably gonna try to bring this one into my sabermetrics class, but there's a lot of really cool stuff that you can do with these HTML widgets.
So if you click on one of those widgets, it's going to show you what, like base code of how to put that into.
So this is going to take me to how to install it, and then it's going to give me links to here's the GitHub, here I can report a bug, here's some info on the CRAN, all kinds of stuff, how to use it. So if I click on this, here's a lot of info on how to use that plot. Right, so it walks you through a lot of these different things. All right, so there's a lot of little things that you can do that seem like they're complicated to make your dashboard kind of stand out. And a couple of those we're going to add here in the YAML. So up here, I'm going to add in an argument to allow us to share this dashboard on social media. So if I put in the social argument, and I'm going to put a colon, and then you have to have a space. If you don't put a space after the colon, it doesn't work. And then in square brackets, and then in quotes, I'm going to put menu. I'm also going to embed my source code. So if I use source code or source underscore code, again, colon space, I can either have this direct to a website, maybe a GitHub page where I'm hosting the code, or I can embed it straight in the dashboard. So I'm going to choose to embed it. And then if I hit knit, you'll see I now have this social button that I can share this on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, wherever I want to share my dashboard. And if I click on this, you see all the source code that was used to make this dashboard. And so this is great from a transparency standpoint. I'm trying to give a talk this summer about using this for research in place of supplemental information. And if you've ever seen supplemental information where someone's posted their code and you download it and the code doesn't run, you don't have that issue with this, because if the code doesn't run, it doesn't create the dashboard. So if you can see my source code, you now have running code that will work as long as you have the same data and the same packages that I did.
And since it's a project, you have to stipulate which packages you're using.
Yes. So it's embedded right here. So you can see, hey, these are all the packages that I loaded.
So the issue that you can have is if you're not running the same version of.
That is one place where that could differ.
Just like,
That is actually a really good idea. I've not thought of that before, but that would be a great comment to put in the code.
the army units with the turnover, whenever they maintain dashboards, when someone leaves, who was like in charge of that, then the back dashboards all break with the updates.
Yes.
So they have to like use the standard.
So before we keep going and adding stuff to this dashboard, let's host this online, right? So in the most basic way, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go find the folder that I made as my project. So I have it in my R projects folder. Here's my advanced dashboarding folder that we just created. And I'm going to go in here and I'm going to make a folder called documents. So new folder, actually, it's just called docs. All right, has to be all lowercase, has to be called docs. I'm just going to take my compiled dashboard, that HTML document, and I'm going to drop it in that folder. Now, if you were not able to get your GitHub to connect with your RStudio, you are going to upload this to GitHub by coming in here, repository,
Actions, right?
actions. Nope. Code. Create a new file. All right. Or, whoops, sorry. Upload an existing file. So I'm going to go to uploading an existing file, and you're going to drag that docs folder here and drop it into your GitHub repo. If you were able to get your R and GitHub to sync, we're going to go back to
If
R.
you do that though, when you make changes in RStudio.
You're going to have to go back and redo it, right? So if you have your R synced with your GitHub like we did at the beginning, what you'll see here is, if I bring this over a little, I have a Git tab. And that Git tab, I'll now see that I have this docs folder here. And I'm going to check that. And I'm going to commit it. And when I commit, I'm essentially creating a snapshot of what's on my computer that I'm then going to load up to GitHub. Yep. So if my GitHub, if you were able to get your GitHub to connect to RStudio, then you're going to do this step. Right? So you're going to come over here next to connections. You're going to see the Git tab. I'm going to click. You should see something in here called docs. If you made that docs folder, I'm going to select it and I'm going to commit. And then in here, I'm going to put a commit message. So that commit message is just telling anyone who sees it, hey, this is what I changed. So I'm just going to put in first draft. And I'm going to commit. And so I should see something that looks like this, and I'm going to hit close. And then I'm going to push. And so I have to commit, and then I have to push. If you don't push, nothing goes to GitHub. It's just still saved on your computer as this kind of snapshot image. So I'm going to push. I'm going to close. I'm going to get out of this, and I'm going to go back to GitHub. So if I go back to the repo here, we see I now have a docs folder here. And I'm going to go to my settings for this repo. And I'm going to scroll all the way down here to this yellow bar for GitHub pages. And so I'm going to click on this check it out here. And this is where we're going to tell GitHub where to look for the file. So under source, I'm going to change this to main. And then I'm going to change root to docs. And I'm going to hit save. So I went to settings. I came all the way down and I clicked on this check it out here.
I don't see what we have now. Upgrade to make it public. Oh,
Did you make the repo
I
private?
made it private.
If you made it private, I don't know if you can do this because you're creating a website that anyone can get to.
So let me change the settings and make it.
Yeah, so if you make it public, then you should get to this. If I come to, if I go to settings again, general at the bottom, change visibility, and you can change it from private to public. So again, check it out here. We're going to make sure this is on main. I'm going to change from root to docs, and I'm going to hit save. And so it takes about a minute to go, but it's now says my site is published here. I'm going to click on that. And now anyone with this link can get to my dashboard. So if you end up to a site like this, you now have a dashboard that you have published online that anybody can get to.
Okay, so I did check it out here. Then the sources, instead of none, I changed that to
Main,
main,
and then change from root to docs,
goes to docs.
and then hit save. If you get a 404, it hasn't finished posting yet. So I just refresh it. It takes about a minute or two to go. Now, while you're here, I'm going to copy the URL for this. So I'm just going to copy this out of that bar here, and I'm going to go back to my repo. So I'm going to back out of this, and I'm going to go back to my repo here. And you have this little settings button for the about. I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to paste that address here and hit save changes. The commit. You don't see a docs folder here? So here, I was at Git. Did you check? You should have a docs folder here. So check that. Hit commit. Hit commit. And then if it, as long as it doesn't say that you have an error there, you're going to hit push. All right. So What's that?
One more time, what did you do with the website?
Oh, so on the website, so once I was at the dashboard, I'm gonna copy the website for it.
Yep.
So I'm just gonna copy this out of the URL bar up there.
Yep.
I'm gonna go back to my repo. And then I'm gonna hit this setting thing next to the about, and I'm gonna paste in the website here. And then if I hit save changes, now anyone that comes to this repo, they will see the website here that'll take them straight to the dashboard.
I don't have that website.
So
You don't.
in the beginning.
It looks like you do, but you don't.
Set our settings to like connect to the Git. This is the distinguishing point where we could save to our own computer, or we would have to deliberately push to Git on it.
You have to deliberately push to Git if you want it up here. Even though we changed all those settings, that's just to give you the option to deliberately push it to GitHub. So if you're in your repo, scroll down to the bottom, you'll see GitHub pages. Click on that and then hit view deployment. So let's take a look at a couple other things that we can do with this dashboard. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do a tab set. Sometimes I don't want to see all of my plots at one time. I want to make it a little bit bigger, and then I can go through different pages that have my tabs. So what I'm going to do first, instead of being in columns, I'm going to change this to rows. So it's just row. There's no S at the end, which is kind of annoying. And I'm going to get rid of the second column in here. Okay. And one thing to note, even if I change my orientation from column to row, I do not have to change these labels. Even though it says column here, it's going to treat it as a row because it's going to listen to what's up in the YAML. So I'm going to knit this and we'll see what happens. The second one that said column. So in between the scatter plot and chart B. And so I've changed this to rows. I have one row now, and you see all three of my plots at one time. But I don't really want to see all three at one time because it makes them smaller. So I'm going to change this and add a tab set. So I am going to go here and take out this data width. And I'm going to put dot tab set. And I'm just going to reknit my document. And when I do this, it's now made different tabs. So my plot takes up the whole screen and I can tab between the three. So this works well if you have plots that you need to see bigger or like in a bigger size, that if they're shrunk down, maybe the labels are too small. If you're showing them all at the same time, I can tab set through these. Now I can also add a sidebar in here. So up here at the top, right under this plots for the page, I'm going to add in a sidebar. So I'm just going to call this sidebar. In my curly braces here, I'm going to put dot sidebar. On the next line, I'm going to do that level 1 or level 2 header. So I'm going to separate it out. So there's a separate element on that page. It's a regular dash. So two ways. So you could do it in you could put comments in your code chunks just like you normally would in a Markdown. You have to use an HTML comment in the white space. So if I do the less than sign here, and then I believe it is, so it's less than exclamation point dash dash, and then whatever I put, this is a comment, and then it's dash dash, and it's the other arrow, and anything like that, that's just a comment here in the white space. So I'm gonna delete that for right now. I have my sidebar here. In that sidebar, I'm gonna give a header. So I'm gonna use my 3 3 pound signs. And I'm just gonna say this is penguin stats. So I can add some values in here if I want. I'm gonna just say the number of penguins in the data is, and I can add some inline R code here using the tick mark that's next to your escape or below your escape key. So if I add that and I put an R there, that's gonna say, hey, this is gonna be some R code. And I'm gonna say in row of penguins. And when I knit this now, I'm going to have a sidebar on the left-hand side. I have my penguin stats, and it's calculated that value for me and just put it into my line of text. So I could add a bunch of other stats there. I can add images in the sidebar. You really add whatever you want into that sidebar there. You can change the width too. Now, I'm also going to show some value boxes. So under my sidebar, actually, no. So the sidebar is only going to show on that one page. So if I go to the data page, it's not going to be there. If I want a sidebar on the data page, I need to go to that data page and add a site. Oh yeah, for all 3 plot, yes. That'll be there because the sidebar is on the page, not on the plot. So I'm going to add a new row here. And I'm going to add another level 2 separator. And I'm going to put in a value box. And so I'm going to add a code chunk using Control-Alt-I. And actually above that code chunk, I'm going to give this a title. So again, 3 pound signs. And I'm going to call this number of penguins. It's just an easy one to add in. And I'm going to use the value box command. B. And in here, I'm going to say that I want in row of penguins. And I'm going to add an icon to my value box. So I'm going to use the icon argument. And in quotes, I'm going to put FA-Linux. And so this is a font awesome icon. So FA. And then Linux, if you've ever worked with Linux system, their mascot's a penguin. So this is going to add a nice little penguin to our plot or to our dashboard here. So I got the little penguin here, and it tells me that I have 344 penguins in my data. If you're interested in Font Awesome, I love it. I use this for a lot of different things. The Font Awesome website, fontawesome.com. There's thousands of free icons that you can use and add to your HTML documents. And it's just a way to add a little something extra to it. I'm going to skip the gauge for right now. If we have time at the end, I'll come back to that. But I wanted to talk drop-down tabs and themes. So if you have a lot of pages that you want, it's kind of a pain because once you hit the end of this row, it's going to start kind of overlapping whatever you have in this first row. And so I can make drop-down tabs that if I click on this one, there's 3 or 4 pages nested under it. And so I'm going to close out of this. And for each of my pages, I'm going to add a nav menu. So I'm going to come up to the top where I have my plots. And in curly braces here, I'm going to put data dash nav menu equals, and then in quotes, whatever I want to call it. I'm just going to call it pages. No spaces. If you put any spaces, it's not going to work. So that's one thing where it's particular. Now I'm just going to copy this. And I'm going to go down to my other page, my data page, and I'm going to add it there as well.
What does this do? Instead of.
Having them next to each other, I'm nesting them under a common name.
Yes.
Yes. So if I hit knit now, we see now I have pages, and if I click on that, both of my two pages are nested under that header. So this helps also when you have really long names for your pages. You can do it there, so it's not going to start overlapping stuff on your dashboard.
So you have to put that in plots and data.
Yes, I had to do it for each page that I wanted there. And so, yes. Was it
It's not going across that.
this bar?
I'm missing the photo and it's still not going across the whole way. I said,
If you have a plot popping up next to it, that means they're on the same row. So I would make sure, so you would have under your sidebar, I'm going to have a row separator. So this is that level 2 separator. I'm then going to have my value box, and then I'm going to have another level 2 separator here to say, take everything that's after this and put it onto the next row.
I see the same thing.
Yeah, you need an extra space here. So if you don't have a space after these,
A row and then space before.
Yep.
Yeah, so that might say.
yeah. So every time you have one of these separators, these dashes or equals, you need a blank line after it. Otherwise, it's gonna throw an error for you. So last big thing here I wanted to add in was theming. There's some preset themes that you can use for your dashboard. And so here, if I can change this in the YAML using the theme command. So theme : I'm then going to go to the next line, and you're going to see it's indented. You have to have the indent there. I'm then going to add version : space 4. So I'm using version 4 of boot swatch. So this is boot watch, and I'm going to tell it what theme I want. I'm going to use sandstone. If I knit this now, it's a preset CSS style that's going to change the theme of your dashboard. And so they have a variety of them that are preset. You could also write your own CSS code to customize this however you want. So it's changed my colors. It's changed what my table looks like a little bit. You see the buttons have changed kind of in shape and size. And so on the Bootswatch website, bootswatch.com, it has all these preset themes you can use. We're using Sandstone here. I could do Space Lab or all kinds of different themes. And not that I know of.
Some of them work.
I've never put a comment in the YAML. Yeah.
Some of them can do it.
So I'm running out of time here, but I've kind of showed the JV way of getting your stuff to GitHub. If you guys have time, I'll go through kind of the varsity way that I do it for the football dashboard, that you don't have to keep moving files around.
So with the file, this index file is saved in the main copy folder, and then there's a version that's saved in the docs folder.
So this keeps exactly. So this is in my main project folder. if I want to go update my dashboard online, I would have to go and move this into the docs folder, replace the file, and then push it up to GitHub again. And it will automatically update what's being shown as the website. Now, if I delete this, so I'm going to go to GitHub really quick. So we're going to go to GitHub here. I'm going to go to my repo and I'm going to delete this docs folder. I'm just going to delete it. So I'm going to go to it. I'm going to click here and delete directory. I'm going to commit changes. And I'm going to go back to R. And actually, I don't. Yeah, that's fine. I'm going to go back to R and I'm going to pull. Darn it. I did not want to replace this file here. All right, so it's here. I want to see if I can pull. There we go. So I pulled, close this, and you'll see I no longer have a docs folder in here. I'm going to create a text file. And so I'm going to come up here to File, New File, Text File. And in here, I'm going to put two things. I'm going to put a name, and that name is going to be whatever I have named my repo. So name, colon, space, in quotes. This is advanced underscore dashboarding. The second thing I'm going to put in here is an output directory. Output underscore dir. And this has to be called docs, all lowercase. And I'm going to save this file as underscore site.yml. And I can close this now. And what this is going to do is when I knit my dashboard, it's going to automatically knit it into the docs folder. The text file had two things. So a name, which is the name of the repo, and an output directory, which needs to point to docs. Now, the way I usually push my dashboard is in the terminal, and it looks fancy. And if anyone sees you do it, they think you really know what you're doing because you're typing in the terminal, but it's really easy. It's 4 lines of code. So I'm going to come here and I'm going to go to terminal. And the first thing I'm going to type in, and you have to type this in exact, if your spaces are off, it's going to throw an error on you. I'm going to put git space, whoops, git space init, INIT. And then I'm going to hit enter. And this is going to initialize my GitHub repo. I'm on the next line, I'm going to say git space add space asterisk. And this is, I want to add everything that's in my folder. And again, I'm going to hit enter. I'm then going to commit my file. So just like we did up here, the one thing you do not want to do if you are doing things this way is you do not want to click on any of these in here in this git piece. If you do that, R will hang and it's going to crash on you, and it's going to cause you issues with your repo. So if you're going to use the text file to automatically go to the docs folder, you need to use the terminal to push your stuff. So on this, when I commit, I'm going to type git space commit space -m space, and then whatever my commit message is. So in quotes, dated, whatever you put in the quotes, it doesn't really matter. It's whatever you want to put as your commit message. I'm going to run that. So git space commit space -m. Where'd it go? There we go. Git space commit space -m space, and then in quotes, updated dashboard. And then I'm going to push. So I've committed, I've saved that like local instance on my computer. I'm gonna push it to GitHub now with git space push space -u space origin space. And if you're dealing with an old repo, your primary branch is going to be called master. They're doing away with that with the new repos, and it's called main. So here I'm going to say origin main, and it'll tell you here in the blue whether it's a main or master branch. And then I'm just going to hit enter. And that's going to go, and it's going to push all my stuff up to GitHub. And so when I go and I look at my GitHub repo now, and I refresh this, we'll see my docs folder. We'll also see everything else that was in that folder because I added it all. But here's that docs folder. And you'll see down here, GitHub pages, it says failure. So if every minute or so, GitHub pages checks to see if there's an update to the file that it's hosting. And so if we give this a minute, I'll just refresh it here. Nope, not yet. I'm going to give it a few seconds. You'll see that it'll be in process, and then it will be active. So here you go. Now I'm pending. Give it another 30 seconds or so. If I hit it, now I'm in process or in progress. And now I'm active. So if I go back to my repo here and I click on the link, you'll now see the updated dashboard with our new theme and our new elements that we've added. So I'll show one more thing really quick. There's one thing I didn't have time for, and that's gauges. I like adding gauges in here. I add them with my value box. So here I'm going to add one more header. And so I'm going to call this average body mass. Below that, I'm going to add another code chunk, Control-Alt-I. And I'm going to do a quick calculation. I'm going to get my average body mass. Average mass. And I'm going to use the round command so I don't have a ton of decimals. I'm going to calculate the mean of penguin. $, body mass. I'm going to add one more argument in here to remove the NA values. So NA.RM equals capital T for true. Right, there's some NAs in there that'll keep it from calculating an average for me. And then I'm going to put a comma here and 1. So I want 1 decimal place. And you'll see if I run this, I go back to my environment, I have an average mass that we just calculated.
Have you ever seen submit instead of ground?
No.
So you submit instead of ground, and then basically you can make things.
Oh, I like that. I'm gonna have to try that. So on the next line here, I'm gonna add in my gauge. Whoops. So my gauge, I'm gonna do this for average mass. I'm gonna give it a minimum value. I give it a minimum of 0. I'm going to give it a maximum value. And I'm going to calculate this on the fly. So I'm going to say I want the max of penguins $, body mass. And again, I'm going to remove the NAs. .rm equals true. And then I need to give it gauge sectors. Whoops, I needed. Oh. So the gauge sectors with a capital S. And we're gonna set our 3 colors here. So I'm gonna have a success. And I'm gonna use the C command here, lowercase c, to give it my bounds. I'm gonna go from 4,000 to 6,300. I'm gonna give it a warning. And I'm gonna use C again. We're gonna go from 2,000 to 39.99. And I'm gonna give it a danger. That's gonna go from 0 to 19.99. And so if I knit my dashboard now, next to my value box, I have my gauge. So it's just another element that you can add to your dashboard. It's going to color code it. We added that success warning danger. That's going to, if you're in those ranges, it's going to turn your gauge from green to yellow to red. I don't know.
You only have 3.
That I'm not sure of. I would have to check the gauge sectors command. So this is kind of all I have prepped for some advanced dashboarding. I use this pretty much on a daily basis. This is the football one that we put out each week this last semester. And this is kind of what started it all. That went through and calculated how well we did picking games this semester or in the fall. And so it had individual predictions. I have some tab sets in here with other plots. Sidebar, this pulled the names from who won. And then the data, all of those things. So, and then this is about 2,000 lines of code for this, just all the data processing. One of the nice things is you can just do all your data processing all in the same file. Anything that you do that is above this first page header does not get included in the dashboard. So I will do all of my data processing through there. And then once I start that first page, that's where the actual dashboard code comes in. And in general, I don't put like any of this kind of code, I don't put into the actual dashboard section. I will do that up above. I'll save it as some informative name and then just call that name down there. And it makes it to where I'm not having to search through the entire thing to find where errors are. I know that I have my data processing section where I calculate everything, and then I'm just calling those items to put them into the dashboard. But so at this point, everyone should have a dashboard that is hosted on GitHub as a website that anyone can get to as long as they have access to your repo or have that web address. So, any questions? Sir, your stuff is not showing up in GitHub.
I also have that.
Okay, I can get with both of you after this and take a look. Any other questions? Oh, thank you. Thank you. So just to give a plug, we're gonna try to do a couple more of these here this semester. Next month, Rob's gonna do one on Shiny, and then we're gonna try to maybe put one in grad week, maybe functions and web scraping. So trying to build some of these R skills throughout the community here. So expect to see a few more emails from us on putting a few more of these together. And we're looking to start a whole Teams page and all that right now. So if anyone has any questions, please feel free to reach out anytime. I love doing this stuff, and this is kind of what I do in my off time. So thank you everyone for coming. I really appreciate it. Thanks to you guys on Teams too.